So welcome to Oscars and Indices. I am here on behalf of Sandy Hertz, the amazing Sandy Hertz, who is the Strategic Partnerships Director at the Skoll Foundation, and she actually had to host another gathering for the incredible Molly Melching, who you just saw at the new theater. She's so wonderful. So their book is launching, and they're having a session over there, so she asked me to host all of you here. And I love how she named this, Oscars and Indices, and being in Oxford, of course, it made me think it sounded a little bit like a George Bernard Shaw play of some kind, Oscars and Indices. So we're actually here to show you some films, to show you some clips, to hear some stories from the ground about how story works and what impact is all about. And we've got a room full of specialists, and we have a podium full of incredible change makers on the story side, and on the impact side, we have CORI Shepherd-Stern, who we've been working with through our Stories of Change partnership, who's just an incredible storyteller and filmmaker and really a story finder. I don't know if she'll have time here to tell you, but she's made her way by finding books at the bottom of barrels and at midnight, trolling through the internet, and she's been very, very successful at turning those stories into things that many, many millions of people watch, both in documentary form and in fiction form. So we're thrilled, absolutely thrilled. She's here as a media advisor as well, as part of our Stories of Change partnership with the Skoll Foundation, which is a 5-year partnership that we've been doing with Sundance Institute. And by the way, I direct the Sundance Institute Documentary Film Program and Fund, and we are the people that partner with Sandy and the Skoll Foundation through this alliance. But Stories of Change is a partnership that we've been doing, and we've been bringing filmmakers and storytellers to the Skoll World Forum, and we've also been bringing social entrepreneurs to Sundance Film Festival with the idea that if you put storytellers with entrepreneurs, everyone will benefit, and if you bring entrepreneurs into a storytelling space, they will leave much the better for it. And in fact, that's exactly what's happened over 5 years. We've had 69 social entrepreneurs come through the different workshops and the different convenings that we've had. And we've had about 40 filmmakers, and each of them, a little later in the panel we'll talk about it, but each of them can give you stories about how that's been a transformative experience for them. So Chad Butcher is here from Participant Media, which is the other wing of Jeff's incredible vision around storytelling, sort of a story for every, like a chicken for every pot. Jeff is a man that believes there's a story for every person in the world, and he's set up many, many mechanisms in order to create these marvelous stories. And Participant Media is just a juggernaut. And Jim Burke is here, actually, also with Participant. And they are just a juggernaut in the story space right now. And you'll hear from Chad what they're doing in terms of thinking about impact and some of the tools that they're creating, but also the new wings that they're opening, the new divisions that they're opening to put more of these kinds of stories out in the world. So with that, what I want to do is actually show a short 5-minute film that I showed yesterday in a session that we had to a room just like this, but most of you were not here. And it was so popular that we thought we'd show it again because it answers the question, what does story do to us? Why do we tell stories in a very succinct form? It's something that is available to you. It was just released. It's from a group called The Future of Storytelling. And with that, we'll spend 5 minutes watching this very beautiful piece, and then we'll come back.
I want to tell you a story about a little boy named Ben. Ben is 2.5 years old, and Ben has brain cancer. And Ben's really happy. He's happy because he's been through 2 rounds of chemo and radiation, and he feels good for once. He doesn't feel yucky, and his father's enjoying seeing Ben's happiness. But as the father tells the story of Ben and his cancer, the father's voice begins to break. And he says, it's very difficult to play with Ben because Ben thinks everything is wonderful, but I know something that Ben doesn't, that Ben's dying. And he talks about how difficult it is to play with Ben, knowing that in 3 or 6 months, Ben will be dead. And yet Ben is so happy, he's so beautiful. And so the father tries as hard as he can to enjoy Ben, to be joyful around Ben. But then he says in the middle of this short story that it's an amazing thing to know how little time one has left. And as he says that statement, he has merged himself with his son. It's as if the father himself is dying. So in my laboratory, we've studied this story extensively. And what we found is that two primary emotions were elicited. One is distress, and the other is empathy. At the same time, when we asked people what they felt after the story was over, we really couldn't get very clear answers. So we began doing other studies on this story. So we took blood before and after, and we found that the brain produced two interesting chemicals. One is called cortisol, which focuses our attention on something important. So cortisol correlated with our sense of distress. So the more distress you felt, the more cortisol you released, and the more you paid attention to that stimulus. The second chemical release is called oxytocin, which is associated with care and connection and empathy. And oxytocin was correlated with people's sense of empathy. And the more oxytocin they released, the more empathic they felt towards Ben and his father. And we did something different after this experiment. We gave individuals a chance to share money with a stranger in the lab. And indeed, those who produced both cortisol and oxytocin were more likely to donate money generously to a stranger they couldn't see in the lab. In another experiment, we gave individuals a chance to donate money to a charity that works with children who are ill. And indeed, those who released oxytocin and cortisol donated money to this charity. In fact, the amount of oxytocin release predicted in both cases how much money people would share with a stranger or with charity. What we're seeing is that this narrative is changing behavior by changing our brain chemistry. So we decided to go a little further and ask, could we actually predict before they watched the video who would donate money to charity? So with funding from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, we reran the study in which we not only took blood, but now we measured heart rate and skin conductance and respiration. And using these additional measures, we were able to identify this distress response and this empathic response, and we could predict with 80% accuracy who would donate money to charity. These individuals get paid about $20 to be in the experiment, and the people who donated money on average donated half their earnings. So we began to investigate this story further. We used functional brain imaging to identify the regions in the brain that were most active while watching that video compared to a control video in which Ben and his father were at the zoo. And what we found was that the most active areas for the emotional story were areas in the brain associated with theory of mind or understanding of what others are doing, and areas that are rich in oxytocin receptors that make us feel empathy. And guess what happens when you watch 100 seconds of a father and son at the zoo? Nothing happens and people just blank out. There's no reason for them to attend to this information because nothing's happening. There's nothing exciting. It's important to understand that stories have to have this particular structure. 150 years ago, a German theorist named Freytag called this the dramatic arc. So there are particular story aspects that go into making an effective story: exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and then this denouement. The story of Ben and his father talking about knowing his son is dying has those aspects. It captures their attention. There's a coming climax. How can Ben's father actually engage with his son in this wonderful, relaxed, playful way, yet knowing that his son will die soon? It seems like there may be a universal kind of story structure. So stories are powerful because they transport us into other people's worlds, but in doing that, they change the way our brains work and potentially change our brain chemistry. And that's what it means to be a social creature, is to connect to others, to care about others, even complete strangers. And it's so interesting that dramatic stories cause us to do this. In these experiments, they do it in a very functional way. People are donating money because they want to help Ben and his father. And yet when we watch other stories or see movies, listen to music, the same thing can happen. We feel uplifted, we feel motivated, or we feel connected to others around us.
So that really says it all, and we were talking yesterday about the fact that we call ourselves storytellers, but actually we're really just chemists. Mixing it up inside people's bodies so that they, do what we actually want them to do, which in our case is change behavior, change minds, and move, social progress forward. So with that, what we're going to do is listen to some presentations. Chad's going to go first, and then we're going to talk with CORI. And then we are going to spend some time getting your feedback and getting your responses. I mean, with a room like this, with experts like you, we also want to make time for that discussion as well. So with that, Chad, if you want to go ahead, let me give you the clicker. Take it away.
Greetings, everyone. Chad Beecher from Participant Media. I lead a group called Social Action and Advocacy, so we are wonderfully charged with trying to make impact with all of the great films and now soon-to-be television programming with the launch of our network Pivot, focused on millennials 18 to 34s, that's coming in August 1st. We try to make impact. So over the last 12 to 16 months, I've embarked on a project to try to track and measure better the impact that we're having both on our film content and, quite frankly, any content that we're creating through the campaigns that we develop in my group and really kind of throughout the company. So I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking about a few of the lessons that we are taking away from the films and our campaigns and how that's leading into what we are currently calling the Participant Impact Index. And I'll give you a sense of where we're going with that. And I'll tell you right now, it's a work in progress. I mean, we're really not going to be kind of unveiling it for a number of months. We're in a pilot phase, so your feedback will be actually really helpful and welcome as I go through it. So I want to take you through a few examples, and none better to start with, since we're here in the UK, than the Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. Just by a show of hands, how many people have seen this film? It's great. It's a story, for those of you who haven't seen it, about 6 British retirees who outsource their retirement to India, and in so doing find themselves with a bit of hilarity going through love and life and really learning about what it means to live life after 50. And that takes me to this guy, how many people know this man? Great, well, you should know him. He's right there. That's Mark Friedman. He's the head of an amazing group called Encore.org. And Encore is a nonprofit that essentially educates, empowers, inspires folks after the age of 50 to find their encore career, to really get engaged in life and recognize it doesn't end at 50, it may in fact begin. So a few months ago, Mark asked me to speak at the Purpose Prize event, their annual event, and he said, but here's what I want you to do. Talk about the power of story to have impact, but I need you to show a clip from Marigold. And there was a very specific clip, about a 3-minute clip, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And it's where Judi Dench's character, Evelyn, finds herself at an Indian call center. And she is, for the first time in her life, at the age of whatever she is, 70 or 75, stepping out, giving a public speech, and actually getting a job. And watch in the clip how she connects with this group of young Indians at the call center, kind of recognizing the power and potential in herself to really give back and teach at an age she never thought she could. And I'll tell you why that's important after we show the clip.
Ready?
What it has become, and sort of what we term as a word-of-mouth moment. And there's a theory out there that for a piece of content, a film, even an advertisement to break through, there's got to be something that gets people talking, some moment that they remember. And for Mark, you saw the emotion, the humor in that moment, and it was something that totally captured what he's about and what Encore is about. And it's why when I spoke at the conference, and perhaps here, he's probably told everyone he knows through the organization and in his family and friends about the film. And I would guess conservatively 90% of the people who attended that conference raised their hand that they had seen it as well. So word of mouth moment is something that we look for and something that we're trying to figure out as a way to understand our impact through what we're developing with the index. And this is why. Companies know this. Other than price and quality, one of the most important influential factors in determining whether someone's going to buy something or not is word of mouth, more than information on a website, email sent by a friend, or an online review. So we think if that's important in making people want to buy a product, could it be important in making people wanting to take action or take a social action because of our film? Where this comes into play is another film, The Cove. And just by show of hands, how many people know about our film, The Cove? So this is about the dolphin slaughter in Taiji, Japan. Won Best Documentary a few years ago at the Oscars. Also really important when it comes to word of mouth. In many ways, for almost the opposite reason from Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, because of scenes like this. The Cove, blood red with the blood of dolphins, right? So if you ask my mom that if she cares about dolphins and animals, she'll absolutely say yes, and she will not see this film because of photos like this. Conservatively estimating that anywhere from 50 to 75 times as many people who've seen the film have actually joined the campaign and didn't see the film. So that got us thinking a little bit about the power of social engagement around our films in a theory of action engagement that we call the 1990. So let me tell you what that is. That if someone's going to engage in some sort of social action around our films or any of our content, 90% of them will actually do so really focused on themselves. It's about self-education. They may download additional information, go to a website, watch additional content. 9% actually do take another step and sort of share the content with friends, families, and others, like Mark probably did with Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. But that actually 1% are really going to step up, sort of be counted, go to a protest, a parade, volunteer, write their member of Congress. We don't really honestly always expect that everyone who watches a film is going to, march on Washington, right? But what we found is with the advent and increased ease of social media and all these different platforms, over the last 12 to 15 months, our 1990 has actually looked more like this. Doesn't roll off the tongue as easily, 249-49. More people are using these platforms to really talk about the issues involved in our content, even if they haven't seen it. And we think it sort of moves people a little bit further toward actually stepping up and getting engaged because their friends are. So it may have doubled. This is not a scientific study. This is kind of a trend we're noticing. But it's definitely there for us. So that's another lesson that we're trying to build into our index. Third film I wanted to mention is Snitch. So this is an action film currently in theaters, at least in the United States. And in it, Dwayne Johnson's son is facing a drug crime. And because of the drug crime, is facing a mandatory minimum sentence. Now, in the United States, we are one of the few countries, in fact, I think the only industrialized country in the world that can send a juvenile to jail for life, right? So it's an issue that comes up in the film, and it's very important to our filmmaker. So for the film and around the campaign, we created this great website, lots of information about drug crimes, about mandatory minimums, about how to get involved, about the film, et cetera, et cetera. But more important is that months before the film, we reached out to a coalition of organizations working on mandatory MIMs. And we asked, how can we begin to build our community long before the film comes out and maybe influence, if we can, some legislation or policies. And we're not experts on these issues, they are. So what we did is, they told us about a bill called SB 9, Senate Bill 9 in California. It was hanging in the balance by one vote. So what we did is we created what we call content around the content, some information and news and videos on Take Part. And the idea here is if we could find something that's tippable, again, this is with our experts' help. If we tip California, we may be able to tip some other states that are going to be facing the same issues going forward, leading to a U.S. Supreme Court ruling. And this is something Jeff Skoll has called the thin edge of the wedge, right? Get in early and sort of pry the issue open and push it forward once the film comes out. So I want to show you one of the pieces of content that we created that has since gone relatively viral. We're probably going to be approaching 500,000 views here in the next month. And you'll see the tone is very different, snarky, humorous, about the issue because we know it affects young people. And our thought was that let's create this and let our partners use it and influence young people and policymakers and see if we can, again, sort of get some impact on the issues. So I believe we have that queued up here.
Is your job unfulfilling? Is school getting you down? Your social circle feeling a little stale? Ever feel like leaving it all behind for a while? No work, no school, maybe even make some new friends? Well, you can in prison. America knows how to lock it down. We may only have 4.6% of the world's population, but we've managed to lock up nearly 25% of the world's inmates. For those of you scoring at home, we've got the equivalent of the world's largest retailer's entire workforce, 2.2 million people behind bars. Now, I know you're wondering if we've got room for you. Don't worry, we've got room. If we can keep the equivalent of North Carolina's total population under correctional supervision, we can save you a bunk bed and a onesie. I can hear you now. But how can I go to prison? With the current mandatory minimum drug laws, it's as easy as 1, 2, 10. What? That's crazy math. No, it's not. It's reality. 1. Have drugs. 2. Get arrested. And 10. Years in prison is all yours. Now, unless you come under a narrow exception, you may only get 3 years, 5 years, or maybe life. But that all depends. The judge can't lower your sentence because of the circumstances of your case, your motivation, or likelihood of you repeating the crime. I know what you're thinking. 5 to 10 years in federal prison might not be for me. Well, think again. You don't have to stay the whole time. In fact, the only way that a judge can even consider whether you should get a lower sentence is if you provide substantial assistance to the government. Substantial assistance? That sounds hard. No, it's not. It's just snitching. Thousands of sentences are forgiven or reduced in exchange for snitching. Many of these deals take place in secret with no records or lawyers. And because there is a strong incentive to lie, this info, like your online profile, is highly suspect. Still on the fence? Well, get down. Sitting on fences is bad for your back. And besides, the government can turn you into a drug snitch like a wizard. Give your local prison a chance. We promise you'll never be the same. To learn more, go to takepart.com/snitch.
So what's great is SB 9 passed, and 2 more states have passed. So it's kind of our victory count is up to 3, and another one didn't pass in another state. But the point is actually we do this for all of our films. We create content around the content. And we create this stuff with specific people and a specific purpose in mind. And candidly, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So that's some of what we're trying to figure out is why did this video work? Why is it catching on? Why is it influential? And maybe why haven't others in the past? And finally, just from the 4 lessons I wanted to bring to you is Food Inc. Great documentary a few years ago about that sort of delved into the food industry and how we can all make better choices about the food that we eat. And thanks to our friends at the Norman Lear Center at USC, has had great behavior change and impact on the viewers. The viewers of Food Inc. are more likely to do all of these 3 things. Statistically significant, according to USC. I mean, eat healthier food, shop at their local farmers market, share information with their friends and family. So really important. But they also showed this, that over half of Food Inc. viewers said the film literally changed their life. So if we're about impact and I'm trying to aggregate and understand how we can have more, I thought, oh, this is great. I'm going to add up all of the people that have seen Food Inc. and then sort of cut it in half and be like, hey, Jim, Jeff, this is how much impact we've had, right? Well, so that question came up, so how many viewers saw Food Inc.? It's a really hard question to answer. They may have seen it in a movie theater. They may have seen it on TV. They could have bought the DVD. They may have seen it through Netflix. My niece saw it in school, never knew that. She talked about that at Thanksgiving. It could have been on the plane, at a military establishment. It's actually really difficult to try to find how many people saw any one of our films. So all of these things have gone into us trying to figure out a better way or an improved way or a new way to kind of measure and track our impact. And it kind of went to this question. So we definitely know that entertainment can inspire and compel social change. It's been 9.5 years at the company being very good at doing that. But do we know why, how, and to what extent? And honestly, the answer to that sometimes is no. So what we are doing is creating something called the Participant Impact Index. And again, this is a work in progress, but our objective is to measure the relative social impact that entertainment content has, and that's all of our film, TV, and web video content. The impact that has on an issue based on the extent to which that content inspired viewers to act, think, or behave differently. And we are doing this for us because that's part of our mission, but we actually think there's great application to our partners and to others as well. So let me just give you a quick rundown of how we're thinking about it. These are the different data inputs into TPI. Number 1, viewership. We learned from Food Inc. That's really important for us to figure out how much impact that we've had. Number 2, engagement. We learned from The Cove that even people who haven't seen the film may be talking about it and maybe pushing impact forward. Third, on and offline actions. Of course, that's important. Are people volunteering at an NGO? Are they tweeting this forward? There are actions that we're going to be tracking on and offline. Sentiment. So did they feel really good about the film? Did it make them angry, happy, or sad? And is that part of what inspired their action? Claim behavior. So after watching An Inconvenient Truth, did you decide to ride your bike to work forever? After watching a show around HIV, did you decide to go get tested, right? So we are going to find claim behavior. And then finally, additional data. Candidly, there's other things that we think are really important that we don't yet have a way to aggregate and pull in, like time on site. The longer you spend on a website reading the materials, perhaps the more impact it has on changing your mind or behavior. So we're looking for actually interesting ideas that you might have about measuring that impact. We're going to aggregate it in 3 principal ways, one through alliances and partnerships. I put up here RentTrack. They are a great organization that has box office data. They have TV viewership data. They have DVD sales. They are so excited about the project, they're willing to give that all to us for free. Number 2, technology. In our pilot phase, we're building a proprietary web crawler that's associating conversations about our content and linking it to relevant issues. And I'll show you how that's working in just a minute. It's open API, so it's scraping all of the social media sites. And then third, we're just going to ask people directly. So if it impacted you, what'd you think, what'd you do, did you behave differently, what'd you believe, right? Currently, we have about 30 issues that we're just testing within this technology. And again, these issues will probably change. We're actually learning a lot about how people talk about issues. If there's a film, a documentary dealing with sort of development and infrastructure, are people actually tweeting and talking with the word infrastructure? Probably not. We'll probably be changing some of these topics. But just know that we are tracking these issues through the social sphere. And I'll give you an example. We just ran a quick test before coming here. Over the last 90 days, these are conversations about 4 different pieces of content: Food Inc., Snitch, Video, Lincoln, our film, and Corona de Lágrimas, which is a telenovela on Univision. And these are the issues that we're tracking via the web crawler down the left. I just highlighted the most relevant conversation, the one that's garnering the most conversation by topic. And you'll see, for example, with Food Inc., animals is actually, and wildlife is the #1 topic driving conversation around that film. Now, we're tweaking this, but how that's relevant to us is actually food isn't the #1 topic. And when you ask my niece why she remembers Food Inc. and brought it up, unfortunately, at Thanksgiving dinner, was because she remembered the bulldozer plowing over piles of chickens. That made her not want to eat any more meat, including our turkey. So that may help us figure out that we may want to gin up a little bit more the conversation around animals in our campaign around Food Inc. Not that we ignore what we're talking about with food, but just seeing what's driving conversation, impact, and action, right? And just as a note, mental health, I thought, well, that's interesting. I've never seen that show. I don't know if anyone here has. Well, it turns out one of the lead characters is dealing with depression and suicide. So that's driving a lot of conversation online. The next few slides, I just want to give a quick sense of, in the survey, we're testing a number of diagnostic sort of theories from academia that some of our partners are helping us at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Is Margaret Miller here from the World Bank? She's been helping us as well. Number 1, the communications modeling. This helps, PepsiCo uses this to determine whether or not their advertising is breaking through. If their content is really connecting to the viewer. We might want to take this approach, and we're going to ask some of these questions in our survey. Emotional diagnostics, you saw with Mark, humor and some real sentiment from Judi Dench worked. But with Snitch, it's a little bit more snarky. So we want to know what kind of emotion is associated best with getting people to act on what issue. Entertainment, education, and transportation modeling. This goes more to the opening video. What part of the narrative and the story? Was it the character? Was it the setting? What really helped you connect and break through to make you want to take action? And then finally, action weighting. So I mentioned the 1-9-90 originally. So you'll see here on the left, personal interest, which was the 90, shared interest was the 9, and public interest was the 1%. We're going to be asking folks, after you saw the film, after you saw the TV show, after you saw the PSA, what did you do differently? And we're going to try to weight them, because we know some actions they don't require as much effort and may not have as much influence. And these buckets are going to change, and we can maybe go more into that in the conversation. And then just very finally, ultimately what we want to do is be able to calculate this index by those key categories for every entertainment property. Now, I'll just give an example. So you see Snitch there on the top, Food Inc., and then Friday Night Lights, which is a great series we've just acquired for Pivot. And while Snitch may have more viewership than Food Inc., you look at actions, Snitch maybe didn't inspire as much action as Food Inc. did. Again, these are just made up numbers, but the point is when we pull all the information together, it just allows us to have some actionable intelligence about what might be working in our campaigns and maybe what isn't working as well. And that's it. Thank you.
Questions, and we'll think of a couple of questions here. But one question for you, just looking at this, is how are you thinking about the longitudinal question? In other words, there are many stories of people watching Food Inc. and there being a surge in response, and then 6 months later, the behavior has either dissipated or actually regressed. Right. So how are you thinking about going back to the same population 6 months later, a year later?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. The short answer is don't know yet, and this is why we work with the experts on the longitudinal question. But ultimately, what we want to do is survey viewers regularly. At first, it was going to be monthly, and then it was going to be quarterly. But that you can actually see the impact that Food Inc. has on viewers over time. And one of the things you should know, too, is within the panel, we're looking to include propensity viewing as a control group. So we're going to compare folks who have seen the content and folks who have not seen the content, and see if over time it's different. I mean, Inconvenient Truth is a great example. A number of years ago, 33% of folks believed that human behavior caused global warming before an Inconvenient Truth, and that spiked to 85% afterwards. Well, then since then, there's been a lot of conversation, and climate change has sort of gone down on the agenda. So tracking issues over time relative to content is going to be hopefully what the index can help with.
We have time for one comment from the audience. Yeah, do you want to? And we're going to give you a mic for this. And we will have time at the end as well to have more discussion.
That's really fascinating. And I was just curious how it actually fits into your sort of selection process. So do you say, here's an issue we really care about. How do we find the best story to get that action change? Or do you fall in love with a story and then say, gosh, what are the interesting social impacts that we can get out of this amazing story?
Right. And could you just give your name, please?
Oh, it's Audrey Choi.
And for your organization?
I'm with Morgan Stanley.
Great.
So a couple things. One, any film or even TV show that we're going to do for Pivot, three important aspects to it: commercially viable, socially relevant, and high quality. So that's number one. And when it comes to what I do, once a piece of content sort of passes that test, then we reach out to experts and, quite frankly, figure out the best way to have impact. Because we think any piece, if they pass those three, any piece of content can. And so we'll reach out to experts to develop what we think is the best kind of campaign to do that. And where up earlier you saw Countdown to Zero, a film about nuclear weapons and nuclear proliferation, there's a very, very specific set of influencers within Washington that the campaign directed sort of viewership and screenings to, as opposed to Food Inc., which happened to be a much broader conversation with, and continues to be, with consumers, including my niece. So, every film and every TV show is going to be a little bit different.
Thank you so much.
Great.
We'll come back at the end. It's really excellent. And it's going to be a tool. I mean, this is exactly where so many of us in the storytelling space, we're waiting for tools like this and working on them right now. So this is a great intervention in that. So where do these stories come from? At Sundance, we tend to work with independent filmmakers, i.e. non-commissioned filmmakers who are doing work that actually they have, it has a relevance for them. It's an issue that they understand. Perhaps they've lived. They tend to get incredible access. They immerse themselves in stories for years sometimes in order to create these films. That's the subset of filmmaking that we concentrate on. It's very authored, very artistically driven, and CORI Shepherd-Stern is one of these kinds of people. And so this film that she's going to talk to you about actually wasn't going to exist. And it's the kind of way that films often develop, which is to say you're someplace and suddenly you hear about a story, and then as a filmmaker or a storyteller, you realize that that story could actually be a really great film, and then you go after it with nothing more than just your intuition. And this is the kind of thing that CORI does. And this film actually ended up, shockingly to all of us, being nominated for an Oscar for Best Short Documentary. And we weren't shocked because we thought the film wasn't good. We actually were shocked because, first of all, the film came out of just their intrepid sort of work on the ground and sort of realizing it. And then the fact that people were responding to this film in the way that they were, and it just kind of shot up and got people's attention. And so we just went through the Oscar campaign that was really guided by CORI and the director, Keith Davidson. So with that, CORI, please join us on stage.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm CORI Shepherd-Stern. I'm a producer, so I'm not a director. I work with amazing directors. And Open Heart came from, I was the producer working on what we've called forever the Untitled Partners in Health film. Got the rights with my partner Keith Davidson to produce a film about partners in health and about the global health and social justice movement. So as we were shooting this film, we were in Rwanda, and I'll just kind of pull it together. Basically, we were following a patient in Rwanda. We were following a little girl named Angelique who had rheumatic heart disease and needed a mitral valve replacement. And she was going to be one of the stories of this larger film. And as we were following the story, she was supposed to have heart surgery in Rwanda through a visiting team because Rwanda has amazing gains in healthcare, but they don't yet have their own established in-country cardiac program yet. The team canceled. So we were following this story, and suddenly it did not look good for how this story was going to end. And at that point, we were so in love with this kid that we really didn't care about what it was going to, we could lose the footage, who cares? But what are we going to do about Angie? And we talked to her doctor, and he said, well, we could take her for surgery to Sudan. There's a completely free, state-of-the-art cardiac hospital in Sudan, but it's very expensive to get her there. And we said, how expensive? And he said, it's $1,000 to get her to Rwanda, or to Sudan. And we were, $1,000? Wait, you've got 60 kids on your list who need heart surgery. How many will they take? We'll make phone calls. We'll get 60 there now. And it turned out that the hospital agreed to take 8 immediately, and then the remaining kids. So we followed the story of Angie and a group of kids from Rwanda to Sudan. And what happened is the story took on a life of its own. Keith was in Sudan, I was in Rwanda with Paul, and we talked late at night, and he said, I'm getting incredible stuff here. And I had just listened to Paul talk about what was going on in Rwanda, and I realized that we needed to totally pivot away from the story we had been telling. We needed to pull out this story of these 8 children and give them their own platform, and then keep the Partners in Health longer form documentary separate. So we really made a big pivot. And we called our partners. We called Stories of Change. We called Kara, and we're like, hey, well, the good news is you're getting a second film. And that's where Open Heart came from. And we're still shooting a longer form documentary, but now I'm going to show you the trailer for Open Heart, which is a 39-minute film, and you'll be able to see it on HBO later this year.
Kuvanga aho tubimenyeye ko ari umutima amaze imyaka 2.
Abagira neza bamuboneye amafaranga yo kugira ngo yoherezwe Sudan kugira ngo ajye kubagwa. I have tried to choose those who were in critical condition comparing to others.
Uzakomere, uzihangane, uzagira umutima utuje kuko uzagaruka wakize, sibyo?
Rheumatic heart disease starts primarily by strep throat.
There are 18 million people already affected by the disease in Africa. 300,000 a year, they die. Pulmonary pressure is low. My God, the heart is coming out of the chest. It was a shit heart before we started. It's going to be a shit heart now. We have been drained out of money.
You know rheumatic heart disease is a disease of poor people.
ntiyaramuka nyine agiye two kwandika Imana izaba yaranyeretse.
We know that we are just planting seeds. I got no idea, not even one of those seeds will become a tree. But at least what we have done is done. Can you hear your heart?
Axis.
Good.
So that's Open Heart, and I'm going to talk to you now with what I learned, because I was like, what can I tell these people? They're all so amazing. All I can do is share my experience of what I learned on the journey as both a filmmaker, and I'm also a social entrepreneur. On this side, I've been doing medical evacuations of critically ill kids, totally separate from my filmmaking, for years, just as a volunteer, figuring out how to put people in the right place. I also have another nonprofit. So I do impact campaigns, I produce film, and so I'm going to talk to you a little bit, like whether you're an impact strategist or you're a film person or an entrepreneur. I have a little smorgasbord, take what you want and leave the rest. So when the what now, which is the what now is the big question. Okay, this is my big thing. Number one, recruit exceptional people. I'm a filmmaker, and I am a wonk. If it were up to me, if I shot the film, it would just be someone standing in front of the camera saying, rheumatic heart disease kills this many people in Africa, it does this, it does it, it's really important, we have to pay attention. It would be so wonky and boring, it would be like the father walking in the zoo. It'd be awful. So I know that, and I know that Keith Davidson is such an amazing cinematic filmmaker. And I know that to get people's attention, you need an amazing filmmaker. And it seems like no duh, recruit exceptional people, but really, you guys are all amazing people with incredible stories. And if you're not a rock star, if you're not amazing at what you do, and by rock star, I don't care if you're famous or not, but if you're not great at what you do, get great at what you do so that you're worthy of a film. And if you are, go after the best. They are out there, they're waiting for your phone call. They may dodge you, but like keep going after them. And I've got some incredible people that these are, colleagues, and some of them are here in this room. Stand up if you're on this. Stand up. Okay, you're just gonna wave. Yeah, there we go. These are incredible people, and they make film, and they are looking for great stories. Don't be afraid to approach great people, and it will matter. And if you see someone that you want to partner with, look at their work. Even if they've been nominated for an Academy Award, it might not be your thing. I mean, who cares about their resume? Look at their work and see. Don't ever partner with someone until you look at their work and feel moved by what they do. So while it's kind of no duh, really, first and foremost, if it's like, Corey, how did you get to the Oscars? Well, by Keith Davidson. That's how I got to the Oscars in part. He's amazing. He's an incredible director. If you want to change it, then you should have put a name on it. The issue is, it's so basic. Humanize the subject. Humanize the subject. Give them a name. Salim, Angelique, Rafia, please go to the screening tonight. Rafia, this is an amazing film. We care not so much about rheumatic heart disease, we care about Angelique, we care about Salim, we care about Rafia, we care about people. So obviously I know it's no duh, but don't just show random farmer, give the farmer a name and let him have his name. My daughter is, I did not give birth to her, and she was born in Liberia, and she came to live with me in the US, and we were at my friend's house. And my friend had these gorgeous photographs, beautiful black and white photographs on her wall of two African women with carrying water. And Lavetta said to me, "Are those friends of hers?" And I said, "No, it's art." And she said, "She doesn't even know them?" And I said, "No." And it was so odd to her, why would you have just random pictures of people on your wall? And I said, "Well, she thinks they're beautiful." And she said, "Does she know that hurts their neck? Does she know that that we don't want to? I don't want to walk around with that on my head?" And I took a moment, and someone pointed out when I told the story yesterday, "Oh, your misery is our art." And after that, I became very conscious of how often I, in the social entrepreneur space, would just use random photographs to illustrate my point. And these are not random photographs, these are people. And one time she said to me, should I just take pictures of Americans and like go tell, people in Africa and, basically use them to illustrate issues? I think she used the issue of obesity, like, look at the problem, So these are people, I wish someone would start a campaign where it's completely unacceptable to use a picture of someone without knowing their name. I think that that's important. Okay. Don't censor the voice. Filmmakers don't want you to censor your voice for them. You may want to censor your voice, your board may want you to censor your voice, but if there is a film being made about you, do not censor your voice. Gino Strada, who runs the hospital, the Slum Center, was such a great character because he said, it was just shit hot before it started, it's going to be a shit hot now. He's smoking after he gets out of surgery, he's doing all kinds of things, but it's compelling. It's not sanitized. He's a real human. You are real people facing real problems. We need to see the problems. We need to see who you are. Please do not put on this is me. And as a social entrepreneur, I don't think I'd want someone to make a film about my nonprofit. You don't want to see the sausage being made. But if you do want your story being made, be real, because that's what will resonate with people, obviously. Let's see, what's next? Oh, trip the novelty circuit. I love this quote. New, unusual, or unexpected ideas or perceptions tend to attract the attention and thus arouse the cognitive energy which will facilitate their assimilation. AKA no more brown and green. I work a lot in Africa. Every NGO's website uses brown and green, brown and green. This is a color palette. Oh, it's Africa, it must be brown and green. And, breaking out, if I say child soldier, you have a box that goes in. Automatically, I can say anything else after that, and you're going to put it into the box. I'm going to tell any kind of story you want. My daughter, Lavetta, grew up in the refugee camp. When people would hear refugee, they would assume that she was like torn shirt. They weren't expecting a girl who, had Vogue magazine that she managed to get from aid workers and dressed up every day and looked like, a fabulous New York model, and that's what she was. And when she met people, they were shocked. It's like, trip the novelty circuit. Don't assume that just because someone is from this place, we have to portray it in this way. I pulled a still from a movie called Pray the Devil Back to Hell because I love the way they shot the interviews in this film. This is about the women's peace movement in Liberia. How many people have seen this film, Pray the Devil Back to Hell? It is a great film, and part of what they did is they shot the interviews with the women, some of whom were market women, some of whom were journalists, some of whom were high level. They got them hair and makeup and lit them well and did not have them out in the field or in their marketplace, or they gave them the dignity that any of us would want if we were being interviewed. That's the style, and they very deliberately went with they elevated this. They really went out of their way to change the perception. And because of that, I think that it's such an amazing film. I don't know if I'm expressing it the right way, but they took it out of like women in the market. And I mean, I wouldn't want anyone to interview me in my sweats and my hair pulled back and like, oh, let's just grab a quick interview with CORI. No, give me some time. Like, treat me with the dignity I deserve. Seek out trouble early. That is Angelique. And by trouble, I mean know what you want to accomplish. What are the obstacles? You have to share the obstacles with your filmmaker. If you know the obstacles, then you know where the tension is, you know what people are up against, and you know where your story is. So you really need to know the obstacles. We learned the obstacles really early on with Angelique, and the obstacles with the issue, because number one, she needed heart surgery, huge obstacle, right? She needs that, but also as we were trying to help facilitate this, it was almost impossible because the doctor in the country, one of only at that time 2 pediatric cardiologists in Rwanda, had to upload the medical records himself, make the travel arrangements himself, do absolutely everything himself. There was no cardiac care coordinator. There was no support staff. And it really helped us because I was able to see an impact goal. Let's get some, support staff in for this guy. Let's, really early. It will shape your story. And it goes back to sharing your true self with your filmmakers. Give them the right what now. You need to be very specific with your filmmaker about about what you would like to see come out of the film. Your filmmaker is not necessarily going to, put their entire film around your needs, and they shouldn't. They should make sure that they're telling the best possible story. But for the audience, when the audience finishes watching your film, they're going to be motivated, hopefully, to do something. And I was in an early screening of Revolutionary Optimist, and that film portrays a group of essentially community health workers who are children in a slum in India. And after the film, people got up, and the children in the course of the film are trying to get water into their slum. And after the film, people stood up and said, what can we do to help the kids get water into the village? And that was not the impact campaign the filmmakers were planning on. They wanted you to be so inspired that part of what you would do is donate money to the organization that helped these kids, that, Amlan, who runs Prayasam, would get some support for the kids. Instead, everyone was like, let's get them water. So what happened is now they have water. And the filmmakers did a recut of the film, and I pointed out to him afterwards, like, you guys really need to take a look at that, because everybody is like really inspired, and you better make sure your impact campaign is in line with what your audience feels motivated to do at the end, or change your film to be more in line with that. With our film, overall, it was about the line in the sand that we draw that says, okay, we agree that if you're in a place like Rwanda, you should get care for malaria, you should get care for TB. We're not 100% delivering it yet, but we generally all as humanity, we agree you should get care for that. But if you have heart disease, if you have cancer, sorry. You lost the geographic lottery. You should have been born somewhere else. And so our film was about healthcare as a human right on a larger scale. And then breaking it down in the film really became about rheumatic heart disease, and it became about the little steps in between. And we made sure that in our film, you heard those steps. The doctor says, we need prevention. People automatically get, okay, you need prevention. Then we had a goal that was mapped to prevention. We need to let politicians know that this is important. He says it in the film so that when people finish watching the film, they were pretty clear on what our needs were. So making sure that your what now is in line. Partner Up. This is the Honorable Minister of Health of Rwanda. She is an amazing partner. Find the right partners. And moving beyond your own NGO or beyond your own circle, finding partners to expand your reach is so important. In our case, we do have amazing partners beyond, like we have a partner in policy, we have a partner for prevention, we have a partner for surgery, just finding partners for all of these things. That is so important. And then finally, and I had to give it its own thing because this is one of the most important things to me, is your beneficiaries are not passive, they are active agents. If you are not showing your film and having an impact campaign planned for the people that you are making your film about, you are wasting an incredibly valuable opportunity. I lived in Liberia for a long time, and we had a screening of we had screenings of documentaries all the time on a big screen. It is a small world, we all know that, but if you're not planning at least part of your impact campaign to include actions that people on the ground can take, I think you're doing a huge disservice. I just love some of these shots. It's just, the power of story. I love this. I can't even figure out quite where it is, but I love this shot. And so, if that is something that you can take away from this that I feel so passionate about, which is make sure that your it's not the first world, second world, and third world, it's the world. So when you're making your film, you're making it for the world. I'm going to show you one last video that I saw this, and when I saw this, I fell in love with it, and I called the filmmaker. I was like, who are you? I need to work with you. This is awesome. And it was just like a week ago. It was the first film short that I've seen in maybe really ever, that I felt like this shows people that feel familiar to me. This shows African women the way I know my friends in Africa to be. So I wanted you to see it and know that you don't always have to go to the highest level filmmakers. There are also people starting out that you can find. So.
We love netball. You don't know netball? There are 7 players, 60 minutes. We have 3 seconds to pass. 3 seconds. The ball goes through the loop. One team wins. Only one. One loses. We play to win. Victory is an excellent reason to sing and dance. Men don't play netball. Men just jump like goats. They can't handle it. They are too serious. They can't take abuse from the women. They complain. Then get back to business. It's about community. It's about friendship. Netball is for women, mothers, and daughters. I'm a mother and a hustler. A wife and a netballer. A mother and a netballer. A player and a joker. Who run the world? Girls, girls. Who run the world? 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 Girls. Girl.
Isn't that great?
And then we are going to go out to you all. We have microphones and get some thoughts, reflections, and questions from you. But CORI, could you talk? There's one element that you didn't talk about with the film, actually, which was how the film itself, changed the direction of the conversation in Rwanda. And Agnes is here at the Skoll World Forum.
Yes.
So, and we even thought that she might come here. We're not sure, but could you talk a little bit about what you're seeing and what you were seeing with Paul and why you decided the direction of the film should go toward Rwanda?
Yes. So, we made the film, and I was so nervous about the health minister seeing it because, Rwanda is very rightfully proud of its healthcare system. They've had the steepest declines in mortality, ever recorded in human history. It's amazing. They're incredible, but they don't yet have cardiac surgery. And this story was about these kids leaving their parents, leaving the country, and getting surgery elsewhere. So I was a little bit nervous, I didn't showcase the phenomenal Rwandan healthcare system that is there. I got an email that said, the minister is going to be screening the film tomorrow night. Would you like to join us afterwards for a Skype call? I was so nervous. I logged in and they said, we've just finished the film. And I was like, okay. We love it. Everyone's crying. It's amazing. We are talking right now about how to make rheumatic heart disease our next priority in the country, how to create a cardiac center of excellence within the country. We're going to partner with PIH. We're going to make this happen. We're going to do what they always do. We're going to do the research. We're going to really take this on. And when they say they're going to take it on in Rwanda, they will take it on. And as a result of that, now the minister is looking at eradicating rheumatic heart disease in the country. It's an incredible thing that happened as a result of this short film. Now, I know that the minister has long been a big proponent of treating rheumatic heart disease and non-communicable diseases, but this just moved it up the priority list and really gave her some ammunition. That's the other thing about the film. Let people use your story. And by the way, not just films, whether it's a film, whether it's a written story, a Mountains Beyond Mountains is a great example of a nonfiction book, whatever it is, let people use it for good in the world, like open source it. So that's what happened with the Rwandan health minister, and then the film was shown at the World Cardiology Conference, and then that started a whole other conversation about a worldwide cardiology movement for cardiologists in wealthier countries to help cardiologists in developing countries, and then it just sparked more and more and more. And then a lot of people ask me, how did you feel when you found out that you got nominated? And it was a big deal for me, but I didn't cry. I didn't, it was like, oh my God, this is so weird. This is so weird. The biggest moment of this whole process for me, and I might cry now, is when I was at my house, and it was before the Oscars, and I opened an email from Sandy from the Skoll Foundation that they were donating $100,000 to Emergency, the hospital that we feature in our film, and I knew that would pay for over 40 children to get care. And that to me was like, I know it's not millions, but it's 40, and it's 40 kids that I know. That was the biggest thing to me. So the film really had, for me, a lot of impact, and then just in terms of now we're really looking at working hard toward on the ground with PIH creating this center of cardiac excellence in Rwanda. So was that? So I want to take the opportunity, because you did such a good job talking about the stories of change, resources and people and the films. We're going to all sit up here, actually. So come on up. Yeah. To have the resource people that are here. Patrick Creedon, you're still here in the back? If you could stand up. And Patrick is a marvelous filmmaker. Every year we bring filmmakers to the World Forum and media experts. So Patrick is here as a similar kind of resource, a fabulous filmmaker. Patrice O'Neill, would you stand up? These are all people you can go to and talk to about your work and that we've been having you meet with as well. Mona El Daif, we are having the screening of Rafia Solar Mama, another Stories of Change film, tonight at 9:30. You'll hear from Megan, who works with Bunker Roy. Bunker will be there tonight, and Mona will be talking. She's the co-director of the film with Jahan Nujem, and she'll be talking about the making of the film tonight. Wendy Levy, where are you? You're right here. That beautiful picture of Wendy is an amazing resource. That's Wendy Levy right there. So you can talk to her. A lot of you have heard her present. And who else is here on our... Rick Perez is my colleague who runs the Creative Partnerships program, and Kristen Feely is in the back. So that's the Sundance team, but we're all here to be story resources for you. So let's have some thoughts and raise your hands. And I'm going to ask one question to kick us off, and that is, let's talk about those pesky millennials. A lot of us have been talking about the millennial generation. And there's a lot of research that's been, obviously coming out that people are tracking. And I wondered if both of you could talk this in. I'm talking millennials, the 25 and under group. And I know that Pivot is looking specifically at that audience. And there's a lot of discussion right here about how you change tone and approach when you're dealing with millennials. I just did a presentation at Council on Foundation. So I was reviewing a lot of research about them. And there were a couple of things that struck me. One was that in a study that was done that I have, if anybody wants to see it, 84% of millennials think the world will be a worse place than their parents grew up in. And 83% actually think that they have the individual power to make change within that, not to change it completely, but they have a very, very high sense of efficacy and individual power. So that totally shocked me, and that's a complete shift from generations before that. And then I began to think about, the kind of world that these 25-year-olds have grown up in. A majority of their adult life, they've actually been connected through social media and through the internet. Never before happened. So there's a great sense of, a thought that you can actually change things through your own voice, through your own actions.
because they've seen it happen. They just lived through the Arab Spring. For us, that's, something, if you're over 40, that's something that, is you've been through, you've seen a lot of things happen in the world. For them, that's huge in their universe. So it's just something to think about. But I wonder if either of you could add to how you think about that audience.
Yeah, no, that is, it's true. I mean, they believe that because it's true. I mean, compared to their parents, and in fact, I see Matt and David and Joaquin. We had a breakfast this morning, some of the other kind of media folks here, and we're talking about news and the changing interest and dynamic as it relates to millennials and how they want to get their news, where they get their news. More than half actually go to Twitter or Facebook to get it, at least once a week. We're doing focus groups for Pivot, and one of the kids said, he's like, dude, I don't know what I'm going to do now that Google Reader is going away. I don't know where I'm going to get my information. He said, my truth is what I see. And with more than 5,000 advertising messages a day that they're getting, they're jamming over 36 hours of activity in every 24-hour day with multitasking. And I mean, they're doing many things, right?
Could you say that again?
30 over 30.
Just because it's so interesting, they actually are linked. They're creating more time.
Yeah, they're multitasking. TV is so social now, right?
Absolutely.
70% of those who are tweeting are doing so during live programming because they want to be part of what's happening, and it's called FOMO, fear of missing out. They want to engage right away. And so it's changing how and why they want to get news and information. And we are, really actively thinking about that with Pivot. And as an example, and I mentioned this morning to our group, we are launching with a daily news vehicle called Take Part Live. But it's not your typical sort of news and current event programming. I mean, the format is evolving, but it's really about, they want to be seen as like co-creating and shaping and influencing the world around them, not just being talked at, right?
Another fun fact is in this, the 34% of the millennials actually use social media in the bathroom. So for those people that grew up having a magazine stand in the bathroom, the corollary now is, when your son or daughter is like 20 minutes later, you're like, honey, get off the phone. So CORI, do you have anything? And then we'll go out to the audience.
Well, I mean, my main experience with millennials, I'll bring the conversation into what I'm seeing with my daughter and the kids that I work with. Part of what my NGO does is we work with kids from exceptional young people from extreme circumstance, and they're all millennials, and they're from West Bank, Afghanistan, Liberia, and they all live together. It's like a crazy reality show on its own. And, that I think that there's a lot of, they're very serious in a lot of ways, and they're very excited, and it's not the typical, I want to get out of my country, it's I want to change my country. And I think the Arab Spring, I mean, we can go in a lot of conversations about that, but I do, think that any conversation when we're talking about, millennials is let's have a global conversation, because the millennials are just as active, in other parts of the world.
And this was a global study, actually, 5-country study.
Cool.
Absolutely, yeah. So let's go out to I saw a hand over here.
My name is Sherry Han. I'm Palestinian-Israeli, and I'm studying here at Oxford. And I wanted to know, how do you bring issues that people don't necessarily care about or even know about to light to filmmakers? Because, for example, you hear a lot about, Palestine and Israel, and these are extremely political, but people don't know about Palestinian citizens of Israel, People don't even know what that is. So how do you bring these kinds of issues that no one really knows about to a filmmaker's attention and say, this is important, nothing's been done about it. I have never seen a movie about Palestinian citizens of Israel, and it's just not on, anyone's radar.
That is a really, really great question. You create forums like this, for instance, where you can point people in the direction of issues and where stories might be, and that's really at the heart of, for instance, something like Stories of Change. But in Israel, in Tel Aviv, and in the West Bank, there are a lot of filmmakers and film forums and events that actually go on. I've not seen something specifically about Palestinian Israelis. I've seen, Palestinians, and I've seen Israelis, but Palestinian Israelis. So I think that there's a way, there are certainly enough filmmakers that are there. There's a way that you could certainly point the direction to in-country filmmakers that are working. But there are also a lot of ways that you can try and get filmmakers' attention by going to circles, going to places like Sundance or Tribeca, other places where filmmakers convene. And they're always hunting for the next new thing, but you want somebody that's going to be able to commit a certain amount of time, has access, and all of that. And maybe that's you, actually. But
I want to say something on that is that exactly right. And when you do approach those filmmakers, you've got to use the novelty concept, right? Because that's a novel thought. So, I mean, you've got to be a storyteller to get your storyteller interested in your story a lot of the time. You've got to let them know what's unusual about it or what's that, put a name on it, all of those things that I said, it totally applies to when you talk to a filmmaker. Give them, make them curious. What, and what's a specific story, for instance, really, when you're selling the story into a filmmaker, give them pique their interest with, it's unusual, no one talks about it, and here's the example of, it can't just be a general issue. Really go in and give them a story of here's what happened.
I'll just make a comment on that. I'm not a filmmaker, try to be good at crafting these social action campaigns. But, it was really interesting, and I mentioned Mark, and I told him I was going to put his face on screen, and he allowed me to do that because of that idea of a word-of-mouth moment. It was just a scene of an entirely great film, by the way, we all think, but there was a scene that really broke through for him. So as just one example, think about, you talk about what's different, it can be a moment in the film or in the story that breaks through. And I'll make an interesting, I used to work at MTV, and every year, this was not my part of the job, but the Video Music Awards, they very carefully craft a moment that would cause a lot of talk, right? And sometimes a little salacious, sometimes kind of interesting and emotional, but then it was intentional and it worked. So just another something to think about when you're crafting your story.
Great question. Yep.
Jane Baker, New Teach Centre. We've actually been approached by some award-winning documentary film people, and I've seen their first film, and CORI, I don't think they had their impact strategy or impact thing at the end of it and scrambled to do the non-profit and the website. So, I thank you very much for everything you share, because, I look forward to being able to talk to them about it. But what I'm learning is that there's a whole language around filmmaking that many of us non-profit people in the room wouldn't even know about. For example, treatments, teasers, films. They know how to go then afterwards if they could get the teaser film, but then you need money for the teaser film. And so they know their stuff, and I'm going, oh, this is all new to me, and I was wondering if you two could talk, Cara and CORI, talk a little bit about that to us who are from that sector in the room. I know you have, Sundance has the development grants and everything like that, but I think it would be very valuable for us to know a little bit more about the process that's involved. The difference between a producer and a co-producer, it's a new world that's not necessarily familiar to all of us.
Sure, that's a great 101 question, and we won't, I don't think we'll go through the whole process here. I will give a call out to a couple of things. One is Good Pitch, which we partner on with BOETTCHER Foundation, who's London-based, and it actually happens here in London, as well as in New York and San Francisco, 2 locations in North America and 1. And there's one coming up in New York on April 30th at Ford Foundation, and then there's going to be one, I want to say June 7th in London. And I suggest anybody with an NGO or your own organization, foundation, anybody that's interested in this space should go to this, because it's kind of a one-day event that wants to perform, in a way, a pitch. You hear from filmmakers. We choose 8 films from a lot of filmmakers who apply, and we actually create a discussion around the film, its use, its potential audience, its issue-based, the impact campaign, all of the kinds of questions that you as an NGO might want to get educated about how it works. And so the day is actually constructed to educate someone exactly like you how film can be used within a particular issue area. And it's fun and it's exciting. And actually Jess Search, a lot of you may know, is actually here at the forum. She's coming back this afternoon, and she's been doing coverage, so you can talk to her about it. And it's really a BritDoc idea that we've taken and developed and moved out in a really successful way in the world. And then there are websites that you can go to and just kind of read up on how the process actually happens. I don't know if you want to add to that, CORI.
It's so big, and it's so big, and it's so different each time. You know, each time. I'd be glad to talk to you afterwards and guide you through anything, or if anybody has any questions. But it's different every time, and essentially you reinvent it every time you do it.
But I will say that conversation is much more vigorous and much more vibrant than it has been in recent years. It's just growing and growing. Interest is growing and growing and growing from all kinds of sectors in using this kind of non-commissioned, I want to say, storytelling for your issue. It's a very, very exciting space to be in right now. Yeah, Pat.
Make another comment that Sam said earlier, that you're all, as social entrepreneurs, I'm Patrick, I'm a documentary filmmaker. I work closely with Sundance and a lot of the folks that are here. Can you hear me better now?
Yep.
Okay. You are all not just storytellers, you are all now filmmakers. All of you, every single one of you can document your own story, as well as if not even better than we can as filmmakers. And to illustrate that, I want to tell you, we just finished a documentary film. We spent a year in the life of this high school classroom in a small town in North Carolina. But we knew we weren't going to be in the classroom every single day. So we asked some of the students to use their phones and to use their cameras to take pictures of stuff that was going on. So there is a 16-year-old girl named Jamisha Thompson in small town North Carolina who shot about 4 or 5 really great minutes of our film. And the footage that she shot with her phone was so good that we actually had to degrade it to make it look not as good as our cameras, because we wanted people to know that she was telling her own story. But if we just used her iPhone footage, it would have looked like our cameras, and it would have told a slightly different version of what we were trying to accomplish. So one of the things that we hear a lot as doc filmmakers is, I have an amazing story for you, and it's taking place in a little small corner of the world, and you got to come see it. Guess what? That's $10,000 to get us on a plane and 5 of us to fly there with 27 Pelican cases of gear. To get what? To get a story that you are living with, or you or your team is living with every single day. I mean, Ned from Water for People and Terry, who gave the presentation yesterday, we talked about this yesterday. Ned is not just a great social entrepreneur, he's an amazing filmmaker, and he's telling his own story. And when you do that, the stories tend to have an incredible amount of integrity. They may look slightly different than The Cove or some incredible cinematic movie that you've seen, and yet it's every bit as powerful. I just want to throw that out there.
That's excellent. That's a great point. Yeah. In the back, and then we'll come up to you, and then we'll come to you. That's great.
Hi, Beverly Schwartz. And my question is
could you say your organization as well?
Ashoka.
Oh, great.
But I'm actually speaking as a behavioral scientist. And my question is to Chad. I understand that you're creating behavior change around a film, and that your focus is millennials. But it sounds to me, and I'm hoping you have other sort of techniques, that you're making people come to you, people that go to a film, or people that go online. And to me, that's only a slice of changing the potential you have for changing behaviors. So exactly what Patrick just said about getting people involved in more ways than just passively watching or going online. And I know that's not super passive, but it's not real active either. So I'm wondering if you have plans to take behavior to people instead of having them come to you.
Thank you. Every one of our campaigns is crafted a little differently with experts and, quite frankly, sometimes behavioral psychologists and others who know more important issues that are involved in the film than we would. And we'll work with them to take either the film or what will be the TV show on the road. We'll create curricula for teachers to distribute in classrooms. So we definitely do not expect folks just to come to us because, as an example, take The Cove. On the list of successful documentaries of all time, it ranks 135th, which actually, if you think of the tens of thousands of documentaries or more that have been created, it's pretty damn good. But relative to the people who've taken the message from us and taken it to their friends and families and colleagues and schools, et cetera, some of that happens without our knowledge and without our help. Some of it, though, is very intentionally crafted with our partners. So to your point, yeah, we definitely, with our campaigns, and we hope to measure this with the index by scraping the social web and seeing where conversation is happening and where impact's happening, understand it's not all about coming to us or coming to the theater or tuning in, although many do.
There's a way that question kind of leads to something that a lot of independent filmmakers, a lot of filmmakers right now are looking at around this question of impact. And I did want to point out that people like CORI and people like Patrick and people like Julia Baca, who's also here, they're actually thinking about their impact campaigns from the beginning of the development of the story as opposed to waiting till the end now. And so when you do that, you actually sort of engender a lot of conversations with potential stakeholders and other partners very, very early on. It tends to not only help you get the film done faster if you have the right partners, because you're raising awareness about the film and its uses, so you tend to be able to bring in more resources toward it. It can change the direction of the narrative of the film, because you suddenly realize there's a whole constituency and a whole storyline that goes along with it that you might not have been covering that now you've decided to cover. And we've seen that happen a lot. And then the other thing that your question made me think about is that we often think about movement building with filmmakers as well. It's not just individual action, it's actually aggregated action. And what's the tipping point for when you take a film out into the world and you either access a movement that's nascent or actually very active, and does a film fit into a movement that already exists, or is it adopted, or actually are you using the film to create a movement, giving people something to be galvanized around, and then it becomes a tool for the movement building itself. And that's a big question right now. Do you access that, or do you want to keep it more on the individual basis in terms of your action question? So, and I know you think about that a lot.
I think about that a lot, because one thing that I am very concerned with as someone who uses media is how campaigns, while well-intentioned, can sometimes undermine movements. And I think about that a lot. I want to be really careful that I'm always putting movement first, so that the deeper structural issues are being addressed. And if Tim's still here, Tim from Landesum, my favorite quote is, structural problems demand structural solutions. And so, yeah, in thinking about an impact campaign, I do think about movement, like empower, how am I contributing to the movement? How am I supporting the movement? And, that's a movement with a single film, a short, that's hard to measure. And you have to have specific measurable results, but it is really important. I've been giving a lot of thought to it lately, and
Food Inc. is an example, and I'm sure you guys have talked about this at Participant, but talking with Robbie Kenner, the director of that, when he started seeing the pickup that it was getting and the amount of people that were going to see it and the talk that was happening, I sort of asked him whether or not, my thought was that the slow food movement, which was an existing movement, actually adopted that film. And so it gave it a very, very early lift and platform in a way. And also the word of mouth piece could begin to work. But because that movement took it on, and actually Robbie was very active along with you all, kind of inserting the film into places where it would be quickly taken up and used as a tool within the movement, gave it an early impetus. Without that movement being there, that film may not have gotten that quick traction.
And I think on that film alone, we had more than 50 partners.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
These are the experts. Yeah.
I think I want to mention How to Survive a Plague here. If you haven't seen How to Survive a Plague, get it. It is amazing. It's a film about ACT UP and the AIDS activism movement that really turned the tide, not just for the U.S. and Europe, but for the whole world. And it's really about how to survive a plague. It's about how to create a movement. Mm-hmm. And it's instructional. It really is. And as a matter of fact, now How to Survive a Plague is being used by Partners in Health to show their people look, this is movement building. This is how these people came together. This is how these people move forward. So, I mean, it's a bit meta, you know. It's like, this is a film that shows a movement, and it's empowering movements, and it's a great film.
That was a lot of funders in that, but it was nominated for an Oscar last year. It's one of the Sundance films, and it premiered this year at Sundance. So that's how you can track that. So just a couple of other comments, if you guys are quick, and then we'll get one more question, Patrice, and then I'll come to Pat. Sorry, did I ever come? I'll come to you. I'm sorry about that.
Hi, Patrice O'Neill, and I really love this discussion about movement building. I was so struck by Marina Silva's comments today and her sort of transformational view of how people move together, and thinking about how film plays a role in that. And for us in our films, I think one of the things we try to do is show sort of role models, and so when people see characters, they can access themselves, and they can see themselves in their potential role in a movement, in a larger movement. And I think that's what she was talking about, is this freeing of being a participant and creating your own movement and being able to do that. And I think film is such a powerful tool to do that, to have that story and that way of accessing who am I in this story, and how can I move forward.
And Patrice herself is a specialist in this with an organization called Not in Our Town, if you want to look that up or talk to Patrice about it. Patrick, if you have a quick...
I want to add to what Corey said, which is that I agree. How to Survive a Plague is one of the best movies I've seen in a very, very long time. And one of the reasons I think it was so good is that the AIDS activists in the 80s were incredible self-documenters. Mm-hmm. They all had high 8 cameras and Super VHS cameras, for those of you who remember that format, those formats. And they were telling their own story. And David, the filmmaker, really the key to the whole success of the film was digging through that old footage, talking to the relatives of people who shot that footage, many of whom had passed away, and getting through that footage and helping to tell the story. So there again is an example of the people who are living the story, telling their own story, and then it's great to find maybe a partner with a little more objectivity to come in later to sort through it.
Yeah, I want to add to that, which is I know that there's a big movement of like, everybody can make a story, everybody can tell a story, we can all tell stories, but I want to make a pitch for recruiting exceptional people who really work hard on story. Yes, document what's going on, absolutely. And you know what? If you can make a great film, make a great film. But don't assume that you can give it to your communications person and make that poor person turn your footage or turn your thing into something that's going to go viral. Why don't we have Coney 2012? You know why? Those guys went to film school. Those guys worked their ass off. Those guys, it is hard work. Every single thing. You're a social entrepreneur. You know how hard you work. You know what hard work is. Filmmaking is hard work. You don't just pull, I love you, Patrick, but you don't just pull out your iPhone. That girl's footage was great, but it was in a film that was masterfully crafted by Patrick. So I want to really push for get the experts in. You don't have to pay for them necessarily. You don't have to commission it. Figure out ways to partner. Figure out ways to pay for it. But I do want to make a pitch for something really well crafted. And if you can find a 12-year-old kid that can shoot it on their toenail, great. Tell me who they are, and I will hire them right out from under you.
Yes, they
are.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have a comment here.
Hi, I'm Kara Hurst with the Sustainability Consortium. And a question I had is around, just going back, Corey, to something you said on the wonkiness factor. So I've done a lot of social entrepreneurship work and field and stories and that kind of thing. And I now run an organization that is completely data, metrics, research, and science focused. And it's really hard to tell that story. And so I'm wondering, either through film or just in storytelling in general, there's such a need for data and metrics and information in my field in sustainability, but in general. But how do you make a compelling story when you have something that's, can look fairly dry, but is very needed?
So that's an excellent. Jim and Tim are like, yes. Well, this is something This is something that Wendy has been thinking about a lot, and I'm gonna, since it's 1:45, I'm gonna match you with Wendy Levy really quickly, and I wanna end with a quote from Tim, actually, who came to Sundance this year and then wrote a blog about his experience from Landesa, and he said, really, I get it now, I get it. Story is just data with soul. So we're here for the duration, and we'll stick around a little bit now. I know that sessions are going to start at around 2, is that right? 2 or 2:30? So thank you all for coming.